Jimmy Fallon finds bliss in cancer. Like, that was Marty. No, not Marty, but the
Count. That's how the Count laughs.
I was going to say Jared Leto from fucking Suicide
Man, my
Squad.
impressions tonight are on fire.
I knew you were going for. You're going for Crispin Glover in Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty good.
He's a terrible father.
Yeah.
So,
but a great
He
lover.
literally went back in time and made him cooler. Came back.
Yeah.
He had cooler parents then.
Aw, isn't
After
that the dream?
He went back, fucked his mom, and then his parents were cooler. Welcome into Film Tank, the weekly podcast that covers both new and classic cinema. On this episode of Film Tank, we dissect the Darren Aronofsky film, which is Black Swan. If you would like to get in touch with Film Tank, you can always email us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Film Tank Show. And you can listen to all of our episodes on our website, filmtankshow.com, or on iTunes. And now, here are your hosts, Nick Cheney, Toussaint Egan, and myself, Alex Diekman. Hello there again, everybody, and welcome in to episode 190 of Film Tank. I'm Alex Diekman. Nick Cheney also here.
Hey!
Toussaint Egan unable to join us.
Oh, sorry, I did it twice.
You hate.
That wasn't Toussaint.
Unable to join us on this episode, but for the second episode in a row, we have Anna Bodisano with us.
Hello.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hello.
Yay.
And we're also not talking about a Marvel movie on this episode.
Look at that.
That is true.
So we're taking a hiatus just like Marvel is.
This is not an insult against you, Anna. I'm saying that first because I don't want this to
I'm
be...
certainly taking it as one.
Well, I can't stop you. But when he said that, when Alex said the second episode in a row, I was like, what episode? And I was like, oh yeah, Endgame came out like 2 weeks ago and I've already forgotten.
Oh.
Which, I don't even mean that because I like that movie, but anyway. Just fuck this oversaturated culture. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, you know.
It was less that I forgot your contribution and more just that I forgot that we had this conversation.
I was going to say, we had a whole hour and 30-minute episode on it.
Sure did.
That's really funny.
Anyway, that was my story.
Yeah, sometimes.
I like how in your mind Endgame just came and went.
I mean, it kind of did for me. I would, and I'd go see it again. But the idea that even like the most advent of these kind of movies, whatever, also still feel like a passing fad in their larger, like, because I know that, like, I mean, that's the thing. We've already, just not to get into a whole conversation, but in the time that we recorded that episode, we have heard about the shows that are going to be on Disney Plus. We have seen the new and more official trailer for the new Spider-Man movie, and so Endgame literally already feels like something that's in the past, despite the fact that it is only 2 weeks in the theater.
I mean, that's how
And
how
Phase
it goes,
4
though.
has
Yeah,
been
but
announced,
like,
too.
you know,
Yes,
for it
a
dethroning,
list of untitled Marvel films.
but for it dethroning something like Titanic, people weren't like moving and on from Titanic when that was in the theater. You know, like people were like, just imagine if something that big was happened again to something that wasn't a franchise. You know, like it would have the actual staying power of like.
I think I brought this up before, but Titanic was #1 at the box office for like 16 consecutive weeks or something like that. Avengers Endgame will not be #1 at the box office for 16 consecutive weeks.
That's just the state of movies today. Yeah. But Avengers Endgame also doesn't have to be, because if anything, it needs to duck down at some point because
the other
its brother is
coming,
going to come out and so on and so forth. But
I will say, and we already are trying to like decide to move on a little bit from superhero movies for a little while, but at the same time...
I moved on. That's why I forgot about it.
Yeah. That Spider-Man trailer had... I thought some diminishing returns, because when it came out, as per usual, all the Marvel people, and they're like, best trailer ever, fantastic, so much drama happening. And I watched it and I was like, this looks worse than the first trailer.
Yeah. I'm
confused about what's happening in it. I don't know what the fuck Jake Gyllenhaal... I know he's eventually the villain.
I'm very against him being in this movie. So,
but if you establish clearly in the first trailer that he is the villain, why would you ever make a course correction in the second trailer?
I mean, apparently, and I've never read a comic with Mysterio in it, so but apparently that's his shtick. Like he always, I guess, tries to come up with whatever, and then cunning capes and capers and crazy schemes. So it's more just I think that first trailer was, in my opinion, poor because they couldn't really do much with it until Endgame, came out and whatnot. So I think that's less about the movie, which I'm also not really looking forward to based off these trailers, and more about Endgame hype.
Yeah.
And now fatigue.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm not excited. I didn't care for the first one.
Neither did I.
Yeah.
I liked Homecoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, most people did, so we are in the minority there. I will say though, this movie very clearly, or the trailer very clearly confirmed that all of the main players in Peter Parker's life, luckily, were part of the 50%.
I was going to say, they were snapped away, and now they're
Which
all
I'm
back.
like, can't you do like one character, like just to show it have like real, consequences? But no. Especially because Flash is back.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's fine. So anyways, not talking about Spider-Man, but we are talking about the long attempted episode that we've been trying to do on Darren Aronofsky's film Black Swan.
That's right.
Which this is like the fourth attempt.
It's a month in the making.
I was going to say. But finally, the three of us are here to talk about it. So I guess I will eventually, after giving a brief synopsis, I guess I'll start us off because I was the one who was for sure the driving force behind this episode.
Yep.
As I've always felt that this was a absolutely fantastic film. So mentioned, directed by Darren Aronofsky, who recently has done all kinds of things like The Wrestler, which actually came out before Black Swan. Yep. And most recently, he directed Mother, which we previously have talked about on this podcast. And then before that, way now, almost 20 years ago, directed Requiem for a Dream, which is most people's introduction to him as a filmmaker. So this film stars Natalie Portman as the main character, and she did win her so far sole Oscar for this film. And also features Vincent Cassel, Mila Kunis, Winona Ryder, and Barbara Hershey. So the film surrounds a committed dancer who struggles to maintain her sanity after winning the lead role in a production of Swan Lake. So I will say that I saw this film in the theater when it first came out, and I really had no expectation going into the theater. I had seen The Wrestler in the theater and after that, so I had an idea of who Darren Aronofsky was, but at the same time, I had no expectations for what this film was going to be. And I thought that this was just a absolutely brilliant film, basically from beginning to end. I love basically the combination of the story and also the background of what this film is going for. This is one of the weird films that definitely is trying to show its artistic approach, but at the same time it completely fits in with the content of the story. And I think it really just blends together in a pretty fascinating way for me. And I feel like this is a film that definitely could be a turnoff for some people, just like Terrence Malick films are a turnoff for some people, or Nicholas Winding Refn films are a turnoff for some people. Like, Aronofsky is definitely a polarizing filmmaker, and definitely has a pretty high opinion of himself. As by the final scene of this film is basically him being like, "Look what I did." So I could definitely see that, and I've obviously not the biggest fan of some of the filmmakers I've previously just mentioned, but at the same time, it's really these filmmakers' works that bring out, I don't want to say the biggest emotions from people, but they definitely connect with people in some way where they are either going to love it or they're not necessarily going to hate it, but they're just going to be turned off by it, I would say. And I, for this film in particular, thought it was just absolutely fantastic. Natalie Portman is giving a just fabulous performance throughout, and I think the very interesting idea of her being a child performer going into this role specifically, and also too her being a leading feminist female in Hollywood at this time, and not necessarily in 2010, but now from where she's come from, growing into that, it's fascinating for me to go back and watch this film, just because she's playing this role in an industry that is honestly just terrible for the people who inhabit it. Ballerinas are, for the most part, and I'm not saying that it's like as awful as this film is leading us to believe, but at the same time, a lot of the actions in this film have got to be just completely taken from real life experience from dancers who just are forced into this just horrendous
regime.
I was going to say lifestyle, because they are trying to live out their dreams and they are wanting to be dancers, and they've been great dancers their whole lives, but they get sucked into this.
You don't have a lot of choices to make in this career.
No, but it's a weird thing, because on the one hand, this is a completely female-driven industry, but on the other hand, there is like extreme toxic masculinity on the surface here, and we see that very much with Vincent Cassel's character, who is completely abusing his position to do basically whatever he wants. And this film is very interesting because I feel like there's definitely some point of view that you could take by seeing this film, which is another one of the reasons why I think it's fantastic, where and God, Darren Aronofsky is just an asshole, and he's got to be, right. Like, he's got to be a prick, but he is almost in a weird way making Vincent Cassel's character a sympathetic figure at points of this film, and it is pretty disgusting. Yeah. All of that mashed together, this is a film that definitely at points is definitely really messy, but I think artistically it has such a great flow. And when we get to the finale, the final 15 minutes of this film are just absolutely fantastic, in my opinion. Seeing the actual dance and the performance and the fruits of the labor of everything that we've seen Natalie Portman's character, but also all the other dancers who are kind of in the background throughout the entirety of the film.
Sebastian Stan.
Yeah.
Oh, when he finally makes his appearance
as
not a dancer, but
he was definitely in there
as a club patron.
Just there, just getting that whatever that verse is read to him so he can go kill Howard Stark again. That's fine.
I think you mean Howard Stank.
It was like those
Howard
10
Potts.
words.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, boy. See, you remembered something from the film. That wasn't hard. And then the finale of this film, as I was mentioning, is just absolutely flawless to me. There is something to be said about the weird connection between Mila Kunis and Natalie Portman's character and her seemingly killing her, but then at the end of the day, she's really just killed herself to give this perfect performance, which is...
Well, the only one standing in her way is her.
Yeah. It's on the nose, but as I was mentioning before, the way that this film is able to weave its content in with its storyline, and also at the same time with what the actual message of the film is, like, it totally makes sense for this theatrical presentation of her literally killing herself, just as the Swan did in Swan Lake. So it is a fantastic film that has a lot of emotions throughout, and I think really just does a fabulous job weaving together with its actual storyline, but also with the source material from Swan Lake, and also putting that in there with really fantastic performances by Natalie Portman, and actually also Vincent Cassel, because I think he's a really underrated actor who's giving a great performance here too in a really icky role. I love this film, so I've got more thoughts, but I'm interested to see what you guys also have to say. So
okay, I'll go next.
Okay.
I pretty much agree with most of what you said, Alex. you said you saw this movie in theaters. Is that correct?
I did.
Okay. Well, the first time I saw this movie was, I want to say, a couple years ago, and it was like on TV when we had like a free preview of HBO or something. And I was super excited because prior to this movie coming out, like, you know how when you look on Wikipedia and, like, something is still in development and there's, like, no information on it? Mm-hmm. I remember, like, watching that page before Black Swan came out, which is such a stupid thing to say, but that's what I did. And then when it finally came out, I didn't see it until, like, way later.
That's how much it made an impression on you.
So
you're just sitting there clicking F9 all day, and it's finally out, and you're like, I'm good.
I'm tired of this.
But anyway, when I finally watched it, I was not disappointed at all. I really like Aronofsky's directing style. Like Alex had mentioned before, Requiem for a Dream was my personal introduction to him, and I think that's what a lot of young people end up watching when they're first trying to get into film, and that's one thing that's definitely stuck into my mind. And then I've also seen Mother, which was not a favorite of mine, but I really did like this movie a lot because I like his directing style, how like the camera tends to follow the actors around, and how it might be just the camera choice, or maybe it's a post choice. I don't know, but I like the graininess of the film. I feel like a lot of directors don't really like to use that, and Darren just goes for it. I really like the storyline. I think Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis are perfectly cast. As I was saying earlier when we were watching the movie, I think Mila Kunis should be in more dramatic roles. Granted, I know she mostly gets cast in like comedic roles, and she can do that, of course, but I feel like she was just so good in it. So yeah. And then I like how there isn't a whole lot of media surrounding ballerinas and that sort of culture, but I definitely agree with you, Alex, how you were saying that I totally believe that a lot of these things were pulled from real life. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when Natalie Portman gets her new ballet shoes, and like she takes them apart and like rips them up and cuts them up, because that's what ballerinas have to do to their shoes. Like if you wear new shoes, they're gonna fuck your feet, and like the idea is you have to basically destroy them to make sure that they're comfortable enough.
It's like, I mean, it's just
kind of like destroying yourself for your art.
I was almost going to say,
exactly. Figure skaters kind of do that too. They have to break their skates.
Yeah, I was going to use a different analogy, but I was going to bring up breaking in a new baseball glove. Like like, just taking it out of the store. Like you don't want it. It's like going to be all. It's not going to work right. Like it's going to be stiff if you don't break it in. So yeah.
Exactly. So.
You have never
broken
broken in a baseball glove, Nick.
Looks like you've never held a baseball.
I was going to say, Nick is looking at it like a sock puppet, and I don't know what is going on.
Yeah, I don't think.
And now it's the claw from Liar Liar. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think Nick's ever held a baseball.
First of all, I was a really good shortstop in my little league days.
Were you?
Yeah. That was actually the only sport I played for like 6 years straight.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Carrie Elways, by the way, in Liar Liar is so great when he's like trying to talk with the kid, and he's like, "Look, it's the claw." Yeah. He's just the fucking biggest goober. I'm sorry, I talked myself into that reference that no one gave a shit about. So.
I mean, I recognized it. I respected it. But I was not going to acknowledge it.
Okay. Anna, please continue.
Yeah, so like Alex, I enjoyed this movie from beginning to end. I feel like when you get to the last scene, it's the last 15 minutes where it's actually Swan Lake. I feel like that could easily be like just not a good part of the movie, and yet it was the best part. So yeah, I really like this movie a lot, and I'm excited to hear what Nick thinks about it.
Well, thank you for that handoff. I also, like Alex, saw this in the theater with no real expectations. I think it was around the time when I was really starting to, maybe a year or so after I started devouring things like the Criterion Collection and whatnot. So I was very young little cinephile. And I also very much enjoyed this in the theater. I have not watched this since, so that's 2010.
Yeah, it's
so that's
almost a decade.
Almost, yes, a decade. I will say, it did not move me as much as it did 10 years ago. As a visceral experience, that's still a lot of fun to watch. I don't mean that in, like, joyful fun, but just the craft and the camera work and some of the surreal imagery and whatnot. It does, like you said, flow together nicely. I will say, Natalie Portman's performance is still fantastic, as is most performances in this movie, but that one, obviously, in particular, that did hold up completely, I thought. Like, I was kind of surprised. But that part of the movie is pretty much, for me, what carries the movie. I will say, one thing I'm lukewarm on this time around is the sanity melding of reality and fantasy, so to speak, because I think it's a neat trick while you're watching the film, like, you know, Mila Kunis showing up at the door after the first act, and, you know, in your headspace as a viewer, having to reconcile that with what you saw before, and just like she does, whatever. I don't know how... something about this movie slightly troubles me, having just watched it, with regards to this kind of fantastical odyssey she goes on. Because, in my opinion, when you kind of almost hit the nail on the head, Alex, when you said that this movie kind of wants you to, or almost gets you to, sympathize with Vincent Cassel's character. And I think that because this movie is kind of like a form of gaslighting. We are told repeatedly that we cannot trust Natalie Portman, and we are also shown Vincent Cassel, when he's not being a dick, to be a creative genius, or at least we're being told that he is. I don't know if we're being shown that, but in general, you know. And I felt like this movie was kind of, if you take it at face value and you actually take it for its word and what it presents, at the end of the day, by the time you get to that final scene, I feel like you're supposed to accept one of two things, which is that either A, whatever happened to her was worth it, or B, what she thought happened to her didn't even happen to her. Like, maybe she wasn't, like, maybe Vincent Cassel maybe is a prick, but maybe he never once laid a hand on her. If that could happen with Mila Kunis, why couldn't it have happened with him? And if that's the case, this is a weird movie to watch in 2019. To have a movie center around a woman who's constantly being abused, at least from the objective third person of the camera and watching it, and yet being abused for the sake of art, and yet one relief you could technically take away from it is that, well, maybe it didn't even happen. And I feel like the movie itself doesn't have a clear answer as to what's real and what's not. And I don't mean that it doesn't present a clear answer, because you don't... ambiguity is great in cinema, but I don't think...
I think the film makes it pretty clear that she definitely is, like, bleeding from the stomach at the end of the film.
Okay. Oh, absolutely.
But then, I'm talking everything before that, though.
Yeah.
Like, you know, did Mila Kunis stay the night? I could see a version of reality where she actually did do that, but she was kind of just being a bitch and, like, left her.
Yeah.
And obviously I see the opposite, too, as far as she ended up in the bathroom with a random guy, so obviously she's prone to just showing up with
I will
people.
say I'm definitely, like, reading into what you're saying and interested in that, and definitely think that that's a very valid reading of this. But I think going back to what one of my initial comments about the film that makes it such a fantastic film is that, like, I could easily go against that argument and just say that, yes, if you watch this film at face value for the actual actions that are happening on screen, like, that is 100% something of it. But you look at the story of Swan Lake that's always in the background for everything that's happening throughout this film, and when those meld together, it equals this really just bizarre, fantastical, real-life characterization of all of these different real people in this, well, real people, but really people that are living in this, and it just equals this really hazy, bizarre thing that and you were hitting on the camera work, and there's some fabulous camera work, and also kind of hazy sound editing that's done throughout this film that if you're just watching it for the first time, you could be like, what the fuck's going on? Like, is the theater broken or is my sound not working? But
the volume levels in this movie is out of control.
Moves up
because,
and down.
Like, it can be the loudest thing ever.
And it could have just been shitty filmmaking. But at the same time, there's an explanation of saying that, well, this actually does fit in very much with this very surrealistic just portrayal we're seeing of it. And I think ultimately that's what turns me around on what you're saying, is that I don't think that that's a bad reading of it, because I do think that the idea of her sanity being put into question is actually a real thing here too. But I take it as it is put into question because it should be, because she's playing this character that is just this fantastical character from this story from hundreds of years ago that gets turned into a fucking swan and has to go out and do all these fucking dances to try to turn back into a real person again. Like, it's just that's one of the things I love about the film the most. So,
and I definitely see that. I'll say for the movie's credit as to what I'm alluding to just now is that I'm reacting to a movie that I just watched 10 minutes ago for the first time in over a decade. So most of everything I'm saying is literally just me thinking out loud and mulling over how I feel. Because I still think it's a good movie, but it just kind of crept up on me. And I think what is the nail on the coffin as to why it's kind of sticking in my head and not like evaporating upon just thinking about it is because of the line that Vincent Cassel says to her of the only thing standing in the way is you. If he is an abuser and if she is crazy, there's just something about that line that seems like Darren Aronofsky doesn't understand trauma and how it is not poetic. And because you can make a movie about art and art imitating life, and what you put into art, like Whiplash, which is a movie I think is similar to this in the sense that you have a person giving their all into an art form at the expense of what? And that's the question. And I think in that movie, I feel like that's why you can come out of that movie, and unfortunately, some people can come out of that movie and say, like, it makes perfect sense, you have to. And other people can come out and say, like, that's fucked up, you shouldn't. But it doesn't change what happened in that movie. Whereas here, the surreality just sometimes muddles some of the problematic aspects of how things like abuse and trauma is being represented here. I'm going to move on from that and just say, at least for now, just say that these are fantastic performances. This is a Darren Aronofsky film that I find tolerable, which is a feat in and of itself. I think everything he says in this movie, he said it in The Wrestler, because, that is very much a movie about a person giving themselves over to their art in a way that ultimately ultimately kills them, essentially.
Were you trying to say does them in?
Yeah, I was trying to. Yeah, that's where I was going with that. But I'm like, I don't know.
Kills them.
But yeah, and like the literal blood sacrifice some artists have to make if that's the one thing that they're passionate about and is the only thing maybe that they can do or whatever. I just rewatching this, I was kind of making jokes about it, but like, man, is The Wrestler like a fluke? Like, was that like a Tobe Hooper situation? Was like Steven Spielberg on the set with him or somebody else? Just because I just don't understand how for one film, and I'm not even saying just quality, but like obviously that might be my favorite Darren Aronofsky film, but like every other film he's made is in this wheelhouse, so I'm just trying to figure out how that even happened, but I'm so glad it did. But my general thoughts is that this is a good movie when it's good. I just don't know that it had the shocking power that it had on me when I was 10 years ago and had no idea what I was seeing in the theater.
So here's the only, and I'm not saying that there's anything bad about The Wrestler, but because I really enjoy The Wrestler too. Yeah. Darren Aronofsky rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and I think that that's not necessarily incorrect. A
lot of the things in this movie are in Mother.
Yeah.
And yet, like, there's in my opinion, a world of difference between done right and done wrong.
Even the poster design kind of has the same concept. Like the DVD cover, it's like the zoom in on the main character's face and then slight chipped flaws. So I thought that
Yeah,
was
it's kind of a
interesting.
weird picturesque thing crumbling in some way.
Exactly.
The weird difference that I'll say about this and Mother, and I think they are pretty different. I've only seen Mother the once, so
I mean, they are different. That's why one works and one doesn't.
Yeah.
I just meant
Exactly.
it's clear the same filmmaker made
Yeah.
this film and that film for me.
I was gonna say there's not a connection between the art and the story in Mother. It's like fighting with each other the whole time, where this weaves together, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would agree with that.
What I was gonna say about The Wrestler is that's a film that stars a man. And
I mean, that's why I like it more.
Oh, okay.
I guess what I'm getting at is that Aronofsky, like, I don't
Maybe
know
he
him.
was slightly more in tune with how a male thinks and has not as much empathy or sympathy for
I think
a female.
Being able to
mind
create a protagonist that's a man as opposed to a female, which are in
Not
the
to
other
mention,
films
this
that we talk
movie
about.
was written by 3 men, directed by another man.
Yeah.
Whereas, anyway, that was The Wrestler was just a script by one dude being directed by Darren.
But The Wrestler is just fantastic.
It's a
There's
good
really, and it's Mickey Rourke making a comeback performance, and
I will say the casting in that does go a long way because obviously that was a
he and Evan Rachel Wood are both very good in that film.
yeah.
You ever seen the? You said no.
No, I hadn't, but I would really like to.
It is, especially if you've ever seen any videos of underground wrestling and the lifestyle that is, that's just pretty much just shot for shot, real life.
Whatever this is to dancing and company, like that movie is 100 million times more in just recreating the actual like backstage look, feel, culture.
Of has-been
aesthetics,
wrestlers trying to hang on for a couple $100 a
Very
night.
depressing autograph signings and whatnot, and even just like workshop talk of like how they're gonna do whatever trick during their next match, like put the razor blade on their wrist, whatever they have to do, and all of it just takes the glamour out of something that is so over, not hype, but over. Because I'm not even meaning that in a pejorative, but wrestling is very much a hoorah type spectacle sport.
No, but
yet in the backstage, it's a lot of people just like whispering and be like, "All right, when we go out
there
we'll
is
just
an
do this."
interesting parallel between that and this film,
Yeah.
because there is definitely a age/popularity barrier that exists. Now, it's not quite as abrupt as it is, and that's another thing that I think makes Black Swan fantastic.
Yeah.
As that the idea that as soon as you basically hit 25, like, you're done.
Yeah. One random last
Yeah,
comparison
sorry.
between the two, but
Yeah.
I do think they
No.
have similarities. So,
Oh, yeah.
is that it's kind of interesting because Black Swan is in some ways the inverse of The Wrestler, whereas in Black Swan it's depicting a culture in which when they're on stage together they're supposed to be in perfect synchronicity, and obviously even though they're playing characters, they're supposed to be all together, whatever, basically harmonious. And yet backstage, it's like just diva-esque and very
Backstabbing.
competitive and whatnot. Whereas in The Wrestler, the irony of that culture, as presented in that movie at least, is that these people who go out and fight each other for a living and pretend to hate each other, like they go in the back, like they just have the utmost camaraderie because they're all in this shitty job together. So anyway.
Well, they're also all like hanging out in the back of an elementary school and then going into the gymnasium to, all these fans that are coming out who were fans of them 20 years ago when they were at the top of the WWF.
Yep.
And I mean, even in The Wrestler, Mickey Rourke's character lives in this shitty trailer, and he's got like the posters up from when he was in like headlining pay-per-views for the big wrestling promotions.
He still has his own.
He has his all he has like an old like first generation Nintendo, and he has the video game that he was on, and that's the only game he'll play.
Yes.
And all these kids,
He barely knows how to play,
Right.
But he has it,
and he has to always has to play as himself. Like it is
the way he gets slightly depressed when the little kids got to go after they're done playing. It's just like, anyway. It's just...
and there's a lot more to it than just vanity in that film.
Yeah.
But it is, especially the relationship between Natalie Portman and Barbara Hershey's character, her mother. are. Sorry, Toussaint's not here to interject with
I
that.
I almost said that earlier, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm glad you filled in for him, though.
Yeah.
Well, there's no real filling in for him. He's one of a kind. In a good way.
That's true.
I'm not saying that in a bad way. So their relationship, I think, is actually pretty fantastic throughout this because it is a little horrifying. And at the same time, there's this, like, I don't know why, like, every time I've seen this, I've thought it less and less. So I'm, like, not positive. But there's, to me, always been this weird, like, sexually abusive undertone between her mother and herself that I've always picked up on, and I don't necessarily know if it's true, but just the idea of her, like, treating her like a little girl and pretty much trapping her in the house anytime that she's not at practice for dance is really creepy. And I mean, the drawings are creepy as fuck too, but the sexual scenes and the weird sort of feelings that she has when she's having all the sexual experiences and her mother always keeps showing up it's just really creepy, and it gives me a lot of weird vibes. But what I like about the film is that's just my reading of it. It's very restrained. There's no like over the top explanation of that. Like, that's just something that, like, I picked up on just because of all the little details that pop up.
Can I say an interesting reading of this movie that while I don't subscribe to, I found this to be kind of fascinating. When I saw this movie for the first time in the theater, I went with my brother, and my brother barely ever went to the theater, and especially the older he got. Like, I go to the movies to this day with my parents, like, all the time, and my brother usually sat that kind of stuff out. But he ended up going to see this. At the time, he was in college he was majoring in special education, because that's what he thought he was going to do. So he was very much in that mode. And I thought it was kind of fascinating that when he left the theater, and the more I think about it, while I don't agree with it, I also don't really disagree with this. He saw it through that lens, and he left this movie basically kind of interpreting that, like, well, what if Natalie Portman's character is, like, her mother's not crazy at all, and Natalie Portman has always shown signs of kind of insanity, so she's always been overprotective of her because of that. And and my brother said some of the way Barbara Hershey's character was portrayed, and I think in that restraint, was almost like telltale signs of parents who have children with disability, where if you don't know the history, it looks like one thing, when in reality, it's, to stop them from harming themselves. And when that memory came back up when I was rewatching it, and I actually kind of got that vibe a little bit this time around when she was watching her in the performance during the final 15 minutes, and I felt like she was crying because she was kind of like, yeah, this is the final. Like, she's the only one who understood what was happening. Now, in a surreal way, like a parent shouldn't just be like, yeah, you go die, girl.
Now, on the other hand,
but in that kind of letting go thing.
Well,
now,
on the other hand,
that's not the only way that could be read.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like that could still be true. But Barbara Hershey, pardon me, is also, like, it's undeniable that she is just continuing on with a lot of this. Like, if indeed that is the case, and she is just trying to protect her, why is she going about it in this particular way?
True.
And why is she encouraging her to, like, meet up with Vincent Cassel's character and all that kind of thing?
Now, I will say, that's dead on, and that's why, for the most part, I don't think that's, like, it's definitely not my predominant interpretation of the movie. But one other little scene that kind of made me once again kind of remember that was, I do find it fascinating for a character who's so controlling and so, like, intense about her daughter being into this, whatever, that the day of, she'd rather have her daughter just rest because her health seemed more important than actually getting to the show, which, like, for that to happen at that moment, it kind of goes against everything we've been told that Natalie Portman has been rebelling against. So I just found that kind of fascinating. Yeah. So anyway.
I like that point of view a lot because, like Alex was saying, like, there are lots of things about Barbara Hershey's character that are very ambiguous that to the audience we can only assume, like, so many things, such as, like, I guess we can assume that after Barbara Hershey had Natalie Portman and she thus had to retire from dance, like, is she an artist? Is that why she keeps drawing the same portrait over and over again of her daughter? Like,
or can she never leave the house because she's always got to watch her daughter?
Exactly.
So
or will she never leave the house because she has to watch her daughter?
Yeah.
So. Or I got nothing.
And then her mom reacting very poorly when Natalie Portman was like, I really shouldn't eat all that cake that you just bought, even though it's beautiful. I'm sorry, I can't have it. And her mom just getting furiously angry and almost completely throwing it in the trash. So, I mean, I like that perspective a lot, Nick. But yeah, the illusions when it came to like the sexual scenes and then her mom showing up, like that kind of shows a different side of it too, and that's definitely not accidental.
No, but the fact that it is super ambiguous and the viewer can just fill that void with whatever they want is pretty fantastic in this film.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I'm so positive about this movie, which is that I was surprised that when I rewatched it, despite if I didn't really like it as much as I definitely did back then, I was surprised that like that kind of interpretation in no way was dispelled watching it a second time. Like it does the surreality, even if I think it gets in the way of the message, it does enhance the experience and I would say the thematic resonance of just what you want out of a movie like this. Because I definitely think there's a lot of threads here. I also say I kind of wish we had a little bit more from the mother. Not like more as far as like more concrete answers or anything like that, but for such a big presence in her life, by the time the final act goes, she is kind of relegated to just being a literal member of the audience, and Vincent Cassel seems like a more important figure in her life, which I'm not saying I don't understand the possible thematic suggestion of that kind of posterity, but I guess I'm slightly more interested in a mother having a grueling living situation with her maybe crazy daughter than I am with a guy who just takes advantage of a girl for art.
Yeah, I actually think
that's the one part I just don't think that has aged as well.
No, and you're actually probably right on that. But I do think the final image of her being surrounded by Vincent Cassel and all the other dancers, and then not having the mother there and not necessarily knowing what's happening and it being backstage behind the scenes of all this that's happening as she's literally looking into the lights as they are getting bright as she's dying on the I think it is there and it is very easy to understand, but at the same time I think it's also fantastic.
Yeah.
So what did we think about the scene where she goes and gets drugged and then has a thing about being drugged, but she clearly knew that was happening, and then she takes an opinion after that? Because that's a very interesting part of this film to me, because I actually do think that the editing in that sequence is fantastic, the dance sequence, because there's so much happening in split editing sequences. But at the same time, like, there's this, like, anger afterwards when she meets with Mila Kunis's character when she's like, you drugged me, but at the same time, like, she saw it and she also made mention of it, and she's like, so we'll only last 2 hours. She's like, yeah. She's like, okay. I don't know.
Well, I think the anger, I will say, is more just placed at, like, she thought she was with her, so even if she was still feeling it, she was in a safe position because she wouldn't be putting Natalie Portman's character in a situation that she herself wouldn't want to be in, and yet waking up without her dispels the myth of, that kind of just relationship that she thought she had.
Yeah.
Obviously, then we're led to wonder if it ever happened at all.
In the first place,
because
exactly.
If she can envision doing weird things with her, she could also envision a conversation, so I could also see that conversation of her saying, I never did that, also being fake. So, I think personally, while I could understand the easiest interpretation, or the one that makes the most sense, being that conversation is real and the bedroom scene is where it's surreal, it's still, I think, ambiguous enough where you can go either way. But I think that scene in general, I think it's leaning into the whole trope of, Vincent Cassel trying to tell her to let herself go and whatnot. So I think it's kind of interesting that, I guess I would say in a more interesting movie there would be consequences for that kind of night, but in this movie there really isn't. it's kind of this weird, freaky deaky thing that happened. But then a lot of other fucked up things that happen later have nothing to do with that night.
Yeah, the only real consequences is that's what really leads to the strained relationship with her mother.
True.
But yes,
but
that's basically it.
So really quickly, though, let's just play what happened that night. If it wasn't Mila Kunis, what did her mother see that night? Just her and a random dude, or her?
Just her.
Probably just her
masturbating in the kitchen.
Probably just her all
genuinely like.
Yeah. Yep.
Probably just her all drugged up and then like stumbling to her bedroom.
Yeah.
Or maybe they got into a fight or something.
Yeah.
Who knows?
That's true.
Could be.
So.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that happen in the basically after that scene and then moving forward between that and then when the final performance happens that are you could take into question, did this actually happen or did it happen in the actual way? Like her slamming the door on her fingers, like it seems like that's pretty clear that happened, but at the same time that is like it's fucked up.
Mm-hmm. I think also, to answer your initial question, I think up until that point of the movie, like, Vincent Cassel had kept asking her all of these personal questions of, like, things Natalie Portman has never done. And then, like, earlier in that evening, it was like, oh, you've never rolled before. And so, like, I think by Natalie Portman seeing that Mila Kunis was drugging the drink, she was like, okay, fine, I guess I'll finally do it. And then the following conversation, she can still, like, technically blame someone for something she quote-unquote didn't do.
She likes to play the victim.
Exactly.
Which, in a movie like this, is, once again, slightly troubling if that's art, anyway.
Well, at the same, you're really onto something there, because the idea of her being offered the pill in the first place and then her refusing that and saying I'm not going to take that, and then being forced into it and just saying like I guess so. Like it is just another example of what earlier happened with Vincent Cassel and what happens throughout the entire film of her continuously being told you need to do these things on your own, you need to want to do these type of things,
right? Like the phrase of let yourself go, and that was just her like doing that like off stage, so to speak. So that's what I think. Yeah,
there are some really weird coming of age things happening here too, which is weird because all these people are adults, but at the same time, there's this idea of and I think that might be also something too with just ballet acting in general, of this idea of people becoming their own thing, but because they've never been allowed to be real adults up until then anyways.
I was gonna say exactly that. I want to say it's similar to the culture of like gymnastics and like dance.
Oh god, gymnastics is in a bad place right now.
Exactly. Gymnastics, like dance, like ballerina. Like that, the culture growing up for young people is like, that is your life. You go to school, you go to your activity, and then you eat and you sleep, and literally that is it. And so like Natalie Portman, having never been out to a club and probably never having an unsupervised conversation socially.
Never been out with other people.
Exactly. Because not to say that she, like, has no social skills, because clearly she does. We can assume that, like, dance is her social life. So, to some degree, I'm not surprised that coming-of-age things are happening to someone that's, like, 22.
The fucked up thing you just mentioned about the gymnastics thing, like I was alluding to earlier when we were talking about the film while we were watching it, like, the kind of people like Vincent Cassel, and I mean, it's a totally different, it's a real person, and a real person that was allowed to do these things to hundreds of people that were children, like not adults, and not to excuse what Vincent Cassel's character does, but somebody like Larry Nassar at Michigan State and USA Gymnastics, like, it's really unfortunate and terrible, but it's just really easy to see how these people could get away with this for so long. Absolutely,
because your superiors, like, you're basically taught to trust them. It's not that being taught it is first, and then feeling it intrinsically comes second, and then that's what happened with Vincent Cassel. And then there's even a scene where Natalie Portman is just stressed out from having a terrible day, and Mila Kunis shows up, and Natalie Portman's like, he's brilliant, and Mila Kunis says, no, he's a prick.
Yeah.
So that's like pretty much embodying what exactly you're saying.
Well, when she finds out that she has been picked to be the Swan Queen, and her mom calls her, and we know this because it says "Mom" on the entire screen on her cell phone. So that was something. So her mom calls her, and she's crying. In the way she says it, she doesn't say like "I got the part," or she says "He picked me, mommy." That's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, even the way, like, that's the thing, is that her whole demeanor throughout this movie, I feel like the parts where Natalie Portman is just in herself, like someone who's still working so hard and on the outside still hasn't grown up to be like an assertive person that wants to be the Swan Queen. She says stuff like, he picked me, mommy, not I'm the lead in Swan Lake, you know? So it's just some parts of her script choice, rather, was just a
He would
little
never call
annoying.
me little princess. That's only bad.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
Exactly, yeah. And so, like, even the way he talks to grown women, like, what the fork?
And I think for me, that's kind of what I was also alluding to earlier, which is that I have no problem with those kind of script choices in the sense that you can tell a movie about an abusive man as an asshole, whatever. But I think ultimately with that final scene of this film is that this is a tragedy that is trying to say something beautiful about art. And I don't know that set of Russian dolls really fits in each other.
I think
in the way that this particular script.
I think my feeling on it, though, is that this film ends by saying you can create all of these beautiful feelings that you want at what cost.
Right.
As you, like, films, you literally have to kill yourself to give a great performance in the top. I mean, it's a little on the nose, but, I mean, that's basically what this film is saying. And, yes, like, I think that's a very... And even for Aronofsky, like, I think that's a very clear distinction when she goes up and, like, just pretty much starts making out with Vincent Cassel during the performance, which is, for all the other dancers is probably really uncomfortable.
Oh,
but it's very clear that she is the Black Swan when that's happening, and that Natalie Portman's character would never want to do that or do that, and she's just doing this because she's now given herself over to this idea of what these old men think that she should be doing to be this performer.
Yeah, I will say that's something we haven't really talked about yet, so we can talk about this now, which is the kind of doppelganger aspect of her duality, which is that, like, she kind of has the movie manifests her Black Swan self, so to speak, her good versus bad ideation of herself, as being a whole dissociative other person, And obviously on the surface, that's, I would think, the most general consensus would just be that's her way of insanely coping with the fact that, she's a human being, so she's infallible, she can have dark thoughts, she can do dark things, whatever. But I find it interesting because sometimes that Black Swan or whatever,
I don't know why. When you just said it like that, all I could think of was Billy Madison. Swan!
Stop looking at me, Swan.
So sorry.
No. Got some Sandman on the brain. Because he just hosted SNL.
I recorded and didn't watch any of it. Was it any good?
Every once in a while. I thought it was, for... modern SNL. It was very nostalgic, and I think that was the right way to go, because I don't know that you should do anything new with Adam Sandler. But I will say, the Chris Farley tribute was amazing.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I gotta watch that.
Sings the Chris Farley song, and it was just chilling and really sweet because it was, not to get off on a tangent, but probably the only time we'll ever talk about it, so.
We don't do a lot of Adam Sandler movies on this podcast, so.
Though we might one day. I'm saying there's always a chance for me to force maybe that'll be
The Ridiculous Six will be something that you want to...
No, I was going to say Punch Drunk Love.
Ah, okay.
But his tribute to Chris Farley, where he performed that song, was really sweet because it's hard to explain, but basically it was lightly funny in the sense he had a few good rhymes and whatnot, and yet it was really just a song about missing him, and yet it did address how he passed, and I thought it was just great because it was neither preachy nor was it pretending anything else happened. But there's a line in the song where he's like, "We all told you that you were gonna be, you would end up." You don't want to end up. There we go. You don't want to end up like Belushi and Candy, and of course your reply was, "Why not? They're my idol." And it just had that tinge of sadness, but also reality to it. Anyway, that was fantastic, and there were a few good moments peppered throughout. I'd actually say it's worth fast forwarding through and watching whatever catches your eye. There's a really stupid sketch. This is movie related.
Oh, okay.
Stupid sketch that I did end up watching the whole thing because if you're a movie buff, you gotta. There's a really stupid sketch called the Sandler Family Reunion where Adam Sandler goes to his family reunion, and everybody there is a character from an Adam Sandler movie, and they're all like, "Yeah, you clearly base this off of, or the Waterboy off of me, right?" And they're dressed like Bobby Boucher and doing and everybody's doing their own impression of a character. And I will say this, Pete Davidson did a very stupid Little Nicky impression, and while I hate that movie, the idea of a person having to do an impression of Little Nicky kind of made me laugh in that, oh, how the mighty have fallen. Anyway, so anyway, it was worth watching.
It's been a rough year for Pete Davidson.
Has it?
I never cared for him.
I only say that because we're talking about Pete Davidson this year. We weren't last year or the year before.
Oh, people were talking about him last year.
Well, I mean, I know
the year before that.
I'm talking like 365 days from now. I don't mean like the calendar year.
Gotcha.
But just in general, like,
I mean, I guess the idea of
I mean, I'm with you in the
being
sense
known
that
for something is better than nothing, I guess, if you're wanting to be famous.
Well,
but at the same time, like,
I always say that because he's been rehabilitating his image almost like simultaneously as his image is like, crashing, because he's had some of the only moments I've watched from this entire season of SNL has been his Weekend Update appearances, where Lauren apparently is okay with him just going out there and be like, "Yeah, so I know a lot of you saw on the news about this thing that I did, so I'm just here to explain." And he's actually, I find him funny, and I find him to be a good advocate for mental health awareness. And like his whole spiel on R. Kelly and how like R. Kelly is a horrible piece of shit, and it's insane that anyone would like celebrate him and want him to get out of jail. And then he's like, "Does that stop me from bopping to Ignition Remix? No, it's the freaking weekend, and I'm in it, whatever." But he ended that by saying, "But I do think we could all do a little bit to whatever. So every time I play that on my iPod, I donate $1 to." So like. I guess you're smiling like maybe he's lying about that.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot happening there.
Okay,
so.
yeah. And then he made the joke like, "I've already lost $129 this week," But anyway, I don't know. I feel like when he's being Pete Davidson, I actually am okay with him, but I can understand why he would rub people the wrong way.
I don't think he's very funny.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I don't think he thinks he's very funny. In the sense that he laughs at his own joke, but I think it's more just like, I can't believe that they're still letting me.
He's not like Jimmy Fallon. Like,
no,
oh, that was funny.
Yeah, like Jimmy Fallon finds bliss in cancer. Like, I'm just saying, like, the way that guy operates. Whereas I feel like Pete Davidson does, like, literally laugh at his own jokes, but it's more like he's assuming like someone like Lorne Michaels or whatever will pull the plug on his career at any minute after anything that comes out of his mouth, which is a fair assumption, but so far it hasn't. But anyway, we were talking about Black Swan.
Yes, we were.
Starring Pete Davidson.
He wishes.
I don't know that he does.
I had a question for the both of you, specifically about Winona Ryder's character of Beth in this movie. Now, she had, yes, Yeah, so Nick did the stabbing in the neck motion with the...
Oh, it was in the cheeks.
Yeah, stabbing in the cheek motion. That's...
I've never seen someone get
That's the sound
stabbed
you
in
heard.
the
You
cheeks.
don't see that.
No.
It actually looked pretty good, too.
It did, didn't it?
In a sadistic kind of way.
Yeah.
Okay, so she has a very small part in this movie, but it is narratively significant in terms of Natalie Portman's character becoming the White Swan.
Natalie Portman's trying to steal from Winona Ryder.
Apparently. So
Something that Winona knows about.
Right. So
Sorry.
the way that
That was
she's...
a low blow. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No? Nothing?
I didn't actually hear what you said.
Oh,
I pulled the Toussaint and I looked at my phone for one
Oh,
moment.
okay. I said I made a reference about Winona Ryder stealing things.
Oh, my...
Oh.
It's fine.
Oh.
Yeah. That's fine. Sorry.
She
Please
knows-
continue.
It's
we-
not a
we
low
all
blow
know.
because it's a low blow. It's a low blow because America has made it a low blow. Somehow that is the worst thing possible, and yet...
No, I mean, I thought it was
Yeah.
it was a fun little thing because it is definitely part of her career.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it's unfortunate. Like,
Yeah.
she's infamous for it, but...
Yes.
Please.
Anyway.
Please,
I'm,
Anna.
I'm so sorry that I keep... Yep.
That's okay.
I'm doing it right now.
That's okay. So, the way that we're introduced to her in this movie is her just destroying her dressing room and then just storming out and yelling at Natalie Portman and Natalie Portman and, like, take some of her things. And then she shows up, rather, she's a guest at a ball that, like, introduces the new production of Black Swan, and Vincent Cassell says, Beth is retiring at the end of this season. Thank you so much. And then she leaves during the announcement, very upset, and then announces Natalie Portman as the new main Swan. And then later, Natalie Portman is confronted by Winona Ryder, and who is very clearly upset and accuses Natalie Portman of, like, sleeping with Vincent Cassell to get the part, and is very just distraught at this. Natalie Portman's like, I didn't do anything like that. And then later, Winona Ryder throws herself in front of a car. So what I'm wondering is, it seems that throughout her emotional reactions, she isn't actually retiring. I'm wondering if she was, like, asked to leave the production.
Oh, no. She was forced out.
She was forced out.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
This whole retirement thing.
Very clearly, I did not put two and two together.
No, it's
I mean, the retirement thing is, like, trying to make it seem like it's the... Although, you know what? That's kind of fucked up, because he is trying to make it seem like, you know, trying to go out with class and whatever, but he's also trying to make it seem like she's the one who's deciding to do this and not him. So
Yeah.
it's really fucked up. But yeah, no, she is obviously has no interest. She'd like to continue going on, but, you know, she's now in her, you know, comfortably in her 30s. She cannot be the lead in there anymore because they don't expect that.
Stranger things have happened, and oh snap!
Hey.
No, but yeah, she's being sent away.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's what's happening. That's why she ended up in the hospital.
Well, I mean, another literal moment of this film is she cannot dance anymore. So why does she need her legs anymore?
Yeah, that's pretty symbolic?
Yeah. It's also, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, the idea of young girls or young boys could be, I guess, but young girls for the most part.
I feel like you just barely getting out the phrase "young boys" was the most uncomfortable I've ever seen you.
Really?
Young girls are young boys.
Why did I become a Texan then? Young boys. Oh my. No, but I mean, in all honesty, young girls dancing, doing ballet. I mean, they've been doing this probably since they were little children.
Yep. You were told this was your life. You just didn't realize your life also had 50 years of nothing after.
Well, like, none of these girls have gone to college. None of these girls probably planned...
Had any other job.
No. They've... And they're all aware probably that at some point, like, it's going to be over. And as soon as it's over, like, it's over. Like, you are done.
Yeah.
There's no discussion. You're out, and basically you're out of a job. And it's just, like, it's gotta be just the worst because it's just some fucking guy who doesn't dance or do anything just being like, yeah, you know what?
Yeah, I will say this movie was pretty kind of interesting. I would say in almost any other movie of its ilk. At one point, you would have seen a scene of Vincent Cassel, like, saying, no, let me show you how to do this move or whatever. But this guy, from the text that we're given in this movie, cannot dance.
No, he is
whatsoever.
Exactly.
Like, you know.
He is Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
He does not do anything. He just tells people what to do.
Yeah, and I do love that aspect of it, that we never see him do it, which is quite literally...
I don't think he can.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fair assumption, and for obvious reason, but I just love that that's made literal, as far as the absence of that he is just a person who has nothing to offer, and yet he's the only one who can offer it.
Yeah. But no, Winona Ryder's character, although very much, I mean, she's probably on screen for 3.5 minutes in this movie. But I do think that while important, she is also just like that bridge to Natalie Portman just going on to the next part of it. But I do think it is very interesting that she actually goes back later in the film to try to give back the makeup after that.
Yeah.
And because at that point,
Well, she was probably like, you're a cripple, you need this.
Oh God.
Or she probably like felt guilty or something.
But one thing I do love in that particular scene, it doesn't really involve Winona Ryder, but one of my favorite edits of this entire film, and there are quite a few that are really good. But Winona Ryder is constantly is just stabbing herself in the face with the filing.
Yeah,
I believe it is
nail file.
Yeah, with the nail file, and it is a pretty
file that under. Ooh.
It is pretty good in terms of just the way it's edited and the way it looks. Like, it actually does not look hilariously bad. Like, I could see, like, you know, somebody like the guy who directed Jurassic Park Fallen Kingdom being like turned loose and just having CGI blood coming out of her face and being, oh God. But anyways, the edit of her running to the elevator and then trying to push the button and the file being in her hand with all the blood on is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like all of the shots in this movie where Natalie Portman like sees something off and yet she's the only one who sees it. So like she's the only one that sees Winona Ryder's face turn into her own face. Mm-hmm. And then she's the only one that sees like the reflection of herself in the mirror, like as dressed in Winona Ryder's clothes. And
she's the only one who probably sees her eyes being red or the, you know, or hears the sound effect of the feathers as she's going across the stage. I mean, there's a lot happening that's just her and the audience that are in on it.
And she's the only one who sees... Why are you giving me that face?
Because I feel like you were teeing up something stupid, so...
How wrong you are. I was going to say she's the only one who sees herself eating herself out.
Signed, sealed, and delivered.
That's right.
Thank you.
Bet you feel pretty dumb right now.
Yeah, that's her face right there.
Sure is. How did I get down there? I don't know. Nobody was saying anything, so I decided that Harry Carey would be performing Cunnilingus. Hey, everybody! Come and take a look at this!
How did you get down there? Holy cow!
Is it like a box of Cracker Jack? Is there a prize in there?
Is he Jewish?
Why can't he be?
Nachi, come look at this.
This is the worst Harry Carey performance. God damn it.
It's pronounced Harry Karai.
It sounded a little more like Doc Brown, I gotta tell you. Marty!
Yeah, that's
Marty!
true. All right.
Why are you friends with this 70-year-old man? What's going on? Shouldn't you have, like...
Because he eats pussy.
Doc Brown?
Yeah.
Doc Brown is a time traveler and nuclear physicist and renowned pussy eater.
Okay. You think that he invented time travel and he's not going back in time and...
Doing what?
Ask Ted Danson's wife. Isn't she in the third? Isn't that Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steenburgen?
Yeah. Steenburgen. Anyway, that's Ted Danson's wife in real life.
Oh, I knew that.
Yeah. Don't they have like a little fling?
Oh, maybe.
I meant in the movie.
Yes.
Okay.
She's the one who
Right.
wins his heart over, and he doesn't
Exactly.
want to travel through time
do you
anymore.
think? Why do you think she was into him? Why do you think she gave up time travel?
I don't know, because he could make ice cubes and live in the 1800s?
No.
I don't know.
No.
No? Wow, I used to really enjoy drinking water, but if it's cold, this is awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's really because Doc Brown is a magician with his tongue.
I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but yeah.
I'm really sorry you had to deal with this. This has gone off.
As usual, everything is just
Yeah,
Nick's
but hasn't-
fault.
First of
Wow.
all, I take offense. Second of all, while that may be factually true, no, that's all I got.
No. No, this, yeah, usually when it goes off into weird sexual innuendos, it's just me and Nick and Toussaint, so I'm sorry you had to...
That just means we're not discriminating. I'm just saying, I treat you like an equal, Anna.
Oh, thank you. Well, we all
Please don't.
we are all adults here, so
This is true.
That is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
That is
so,
true.
So
And if you're a child and you are listening to this, so
Nick says he's sorry.
nope.
Go out and try to become a ballerina.
I do not say I'm sorry.
Don't put words in his mouth.
Oh my god! If you're a child, you shouldn't be watching this movie.
Probably not, but you know, yeah. No, you know what? You're right. Turn it Black Swan instead of Black Swan.
All right, well, I think it might be time.
I think I pulled it around.
I think it might be time for ratings.
It's rated R. That was Marty. No, not Marty, but the.
The Count. That's how. That's how the. That's how the Count laughs.
I
Oh
was
boy,
gonna say Jared Leto from fucking Suicide
man, my
Squad.
impressions tonight are on fire.
I knew you were going for. You're going
Yeah.
for Crispin Glover in Back to the Future.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty good.
He was a terrible father.
Yeah,
And so
but a great.
he
lover.
literally went back in time and made him cooler. And came back.
Yeah.
He had cooler parents then.
Aw,
After he
isn't
went-
that the dream?
He went back, fucked his mom, and then his parents were cooler. So that's all right.
Is that all it takes? No.
Who
Forget
wants
it.
to go first? Oh God.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here? Black Swan.
Yeah.
Black Swan. I give this movie a 3 out of 5 stars. I do enjoy it. So we have lost the room here, people. I'm
so
gonna.
sorry.
No, this is in no way your fault. But if you want to take the blame, I'm not going to stop you. I give this movie 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's enjoyable as a visceral experience. I enjoy the performances, and a lot of the craft here at work is pretty great. And it's definitely, in my opinion, even though you kind of alluded to it earlier, Alex, as Aronofsky being super into and proud of himself, I feel like that epitome was hit in Mother so much as not here, even though there's some of that here. Because I guess what makes this movie still decent in my eyes is that this is Aronofsky inspired by art, whereas Mother is Aronofsky inspired by himself. And so therefore what we get is actually pretty decent, and while it didn't really stand the test of time, I don't begrudge anyone for enjoying this. And I'm kind of thankful that we rewatched it, because hadn't seen it in 10 years, so I kind of had no idea how I would even feel 10 years ago, because, I can remember how I felt then, but I knew, love it or hate it, that it was not going to be the same movie 10 years later, from my own personal experience. And I feel like there was a lot more to mull over than I thought there was going to be in my own headspace, and then, of course, in this conversation. But even if it sounds like a low rating, it's 3 out of 5, but I do still quite enjoy this. So.
Very good.
All right, I'll go next.
Please.
I give this. I'm sorry.
Why?
Alex, do you want to go next? You look like
No.
you
No,
look
no,
like
no,
you were
no,
going to
no.
say something.
Oh no,
Okay.
I'm trying to not make it awkward, and I just did.
No, you didn't make it awkward. I think I made it awkward.
I think we both.
I
did.
feel like
Okay.
I took care of that about 5 minutes ago, so
Okay.
you two are in the clear.
All right, cool.
Are
I give this movie 3.5 stars out of 5. In terms of just cinematography and visual style and the general direction that this movie took, that kind of is the saving grace for me, in contrast to everything else that maybe just isn't as good. In terms of this movie, I enjoy the psychological thriller aspect of it, where we're led to rather be told a story in terms of an unreliable narrator. I know that's mostly used in books, but I think in this case,
Used in most mediums, I would say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're
well,
good.
then I think that applies pretty much here too, and I think that is a really cool device to use here in this case, and I think that's really awesome. Yeah, I enjoy movies where actors really, really get into their roles. So in this case, Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis actually learned dance in order to film, so they actually look like dancers. And then all the little details to make this movie as close to reality as possible in terms of the setting. So yeah, I really liked this movie a lot, and then I think this is one of Darren Aronofsky's better movies. So yeah, 3.5 stars from me.
Right on. First of all, love that you brought up the unreliable narrator, because I love that in films, and it's one of my favorite devices. And I do think it's at play here, even if it's not used probably as prominently as is in other films. Here it is very interesting that the audience does not know what to believe, because the main protagonist is giving you information that is not necessarily all true. So glad you brought that up, because I was actually thinking about that a little bit earlier. So
Very cool.
I gave this a very high rating, 4.5 out of 5. I'm a huge fan of Black Swan. I think it is the idea of life imitating art and art imitating life, and it going hand in hand. This is a film that hits the medium really well, and also just shows the dark and bright side of performative art, whether it be on the stage or on the screen. This is a film that really brings everything together in this beautiful mess. And at the same time, even though Aronofsky is definitely a pretentious prick, I think he also delivers a very, I guess I would say, true vision here of what these characters are, and what they ultimately will always become, no matter what they, choices they make. They will always end up at the same spot because of the people that they are. Whether they chose to be like that or other people made those choices for them years ago. It's very...
are they human or are they dancer?
What?
The Killers?
I love that song.
Anyway.
Sorry.
That was the only time where thematically those two sentences will actually make sense.
Okay.
So I
had no
That
idea
was-
what the fuck you're talking about.
That was
so.
really, really good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And all you Killer fans out there, which I am one, because Hot Fuss was the very.
You also really like Hot Fuzz.
I do. I was going to say I'm a big fan of any Hot Fuss. But that CD was the very first CD I remember buying with my own money.
Oh.
That is super awesome. I think that's one of the best albums ever. So
Wow.
Great.
Yeah.
I don't.
If you don't listen to the Killers, that's okay.
I've listened to some.
Oh,
of their
he's
songs.
listening. He's just made up his mind.
Any hoodles, 4.5 out of 5 for me for Black Swan. I think it's.
I thought you were going to say it for Hot Fuss. Sorry, I got excited there.
I think it's a fabulous film, and I really think that this is the tippy top for Aronofsky. Even if The Wrestler is also fantastic, this is probably the pinnacle of what his career will be. So that's my opinion. If you out there have any thoughts on either this film or any other Aronofsky films, always feel free to send us an email at filmtankshow@gmail.com. Also, if you want to find us, try really hard, because you probably won't see very much of us right now, even though we always say we're going to try harder with social media. It you know,
I've been doing it.
You have, but in
We
general,
haven't posted an episode in a little while, but
yeah,
but I still have one to post. But.
yeah. We'll get there,
Yeah.
but in terms of having a presence, we probably could do better.
Yeah.
And not just, it's not...
But do we want to kill ourselves for our art?
It's great. Well, tying all together, that's good. Anyways, you could try to find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Film Tank Show. And our episodes are on our website, filmtankshow.com, but also you can find them on Stitcher or iTunes. Fucking Forrest Gump. Stitcher or iTunes at Film Tank Show, and always it would be awesome if you could leave us a rating or a review, as those things do usually matter on those services. Coming up on our next episode, a film that I know Tucson has been looking forward to, and Nick, I'm thinking you're probably somewhat in the same boat, even if you're not as interested as Tucson.
To see what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to see what it is. I think that this director's previous effort was one of the most overrated films of this last decade. But David Robert Mitchell, who previously directed It Follows, one of the first episodes we ever did on Film Tank.
Yes.
A horror film that has a lot of fans. One of them is not me. And you should go back and listen to our episode, because
I would say all of them is not you.
well, you and Toussaint and Kenny all thought that It Follows was fantastic,
Yep.
and I thought it was shit. So, very interesting episode. But we have talked about getting all together, me, you, Toussaint, and Kenny, and rewatching that sometime this year and seeing how everyone's thoughts have changed, if at all, 4 years later.
You know what? I will say this. And I don't think we should be It Follows, but like when we get to like episode 300 or 400, we should redo an episode. Be like, we haven't seen this movie in 5 years, and would we have the same conversation? Throwing that out there.
Okay. Just start redoing episodes. Well, just one.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I don't want to do it as like a recurring thing, but every once in a while it'd be interesting to look back and see how young we were.
Okay. So anyways, Under the Silver Lake, the new David Robert Mitchell film, has followed a very interesting path, as it was supposed to be released, I think, roughly about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, this is going to be the first episode, I think, where I'm going to actually take notes before we do the episode, as I plan to go on Wikipedia and like come up with my own timeline of... Because that's part of the cultural conversation as to what the hell happened with this movie.
And the even though I didn't care for It Follows, obviously, so I a little bit was happy to see that this was struggling at the beginning parts of it, but when it got to where it ultimately ended up, I did end up coming out on the other side and feeling terrible for David Robert Mitchell, because this ended up just not even ever being released in theaters and just becoming a video-on-demand film.
Yeah. Especially, and it still has an A24 label. And, like, it's not like they're hiding that as far as, like, on the poster.
From what you've said, and I've seen the same thing, people who have seen it so far, and critics have said it's not like terrible.
I've watched the first hour of it.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Uh-huh.
And so far, it's definitely passable entertainment. And I'm only saying that just to not even, because I don't want to give a preview as to what I'm thinking, but it in no way screamed like, well, this is an embarrassment, so I have no idea.
The only thing I can think of...
Is it just a conspiracy angle that, like, people fucking hate or something? I don't know.
The only thing I could think of is that they just wanted David Robert Mitchell to make another horror film.
And they were like, what?
Right, and then they saw what this film was, and they were like, the fuck is this? And then they tried to rework it as a horror film and just kept going back to the well, and it just never happened. And then it just,
Yeah, that's why I'm going to do some research, only because from what I understand, whatever they wanted and maybe told them, like, this movie was unchanged from the moment it was finished. The delays and whatnot, but, like, they never really... No matter what their intent was, they never got him to actually
really interesting.
Go back. And I think that's why then
it ended up
it's
the
on
way it
VOD
did.
now and whatever. But
if anybody out there is interested in films that are just going the way of being delayed, I mean, the Avatar sequel is its own fucking thing. I think that's more has to do with James Cameron than anything.
A joke.
Yeah, it really is at this point.
Yeah.
It was supposed to come out in 2017, and
Yeah.
it just got delayed again to 2021.
I thought the first whiff of, like, a possible sequel was going to be 2014.
Okay.
Like, that was before he then was like, I'm going to do 4 or whatever. So then I think the official became 2017, 28, whatever. But I do feel like when it came out in 2009 and it was first rumored, it was like, yep, in 20... I just saw that number in an article somewhere. That was supposed to be the first glimpse of, like, maybe this will come out then.
Okay, so I assume... Correct me if I'm wrong, because like 4 were announced at once. Are they trying to film them all at once?
It's kind of unclear.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like-
they are trying to do that, yes.
Okay.
And they are doing that.
And-
it's unclear as to why that's in any way holding up the delay of the release.
James Cameron
Jesus Christ.
has made this kind of proclamation that he's going to create this immersive theater experience watching this film. And he's kept saying, the technology's not there, the technology's not there. I think ultimately it keeps getting delayed because I think he knows there's going to be a big fat fucking disappointment.
Can I just say something morbid and just say,
I agree with
what
that.
happens if James Cameron dies?
They'll just release it.
Yeah.
I know, but that's the thing. That's like we have 4, from what I can tell, pretty much not final movies, but 4 filmed products that editors and people who are working on this movie could finish without him, just as far as finishing and completing their work and
Maybe
getting on
by
with
the
their
time,
lives.
It'll
it
just be a girl with a dragon tattoo situation.
maybe by the time it finally comes around, Sam Worthington will be recognizable again.
I doubt it.
Terminator Salvation pretty much put an end to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't worth it.
So,
What are you, Doc Brown?
where'd that come from? Okay.
Everybody.
Yeah, that's fine. The other film that I wanted to mention that is just having a terrible time of it is something we've mentioned before on this podcast, but that's the X-Men New Mutants film. Which
Oh, yeah, that got pushed back again.
it did.
What? So I read that you told me that in that group chat, but so did it say when?
It's,
2020?
I think, it's like 7 months after the new release date it was given now.
Okay.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I really hope it comes out because with the Disney-Fox merger, I was afraid they were going to shelf it completely. Me personally. But the thing is that I'm actually looking forward to New Mutants because that looks better than Dark Phoenix. To me.
It's a better concept, but at this point, it's more worrisome that they would put something like Dark Phoenix out based on those trailers and not New Mutants.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Dark Phoenix has all of the X-Men characters in it. This
and
has
it's based on a classic, if not the most classic story
Yeah.
ever told by X-Men.
but it just quality-wise looks like it might be steaming.
Yeah.
Whereas New Mutants, like that opening trailer, had some fabulous images in
I
it.
know.
I thought so.
But at the same time, it seemed like they probably shot it to be PG-13, and everyone's like, "Oh, R-rated," and they're like, "Oh, no, no, this is
And then
gonna."
Deadpool blew up, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now they're trying again. And I'm just waiting for it to be like that movie Alpha, where the first trailer came out and it was like totally serious, and then
Yeah.
the second trailer was like,
It was-
"Look how fun!"
it was Disney Nature documentary. Come watch a tale of a boy and his pup.
Dude, for real though, that's
Alpha
what it
was about the robot dog, right?
No,
The
you're
robot
thinking
dog.
of. I think you're thinking of like it was like Ajax or A76 or something
Oh,
like
okay,
that.
sorry. Never mind.
No,
it's just
we should watch after. I know that everyone's like ready to go home and be done with today, but we should watch the 2 trailers for Alpha. It is
Just to show
fascinating,
you how
just to show
creative.
you what because the initial trailer came out, and then I think it was like almost a year before the new trailer came out for it, and it's pretty fantastic. So, anyways, Under the Silver Lake coming up on our next episode here on Film Tank. Thank you, as always, to Anna Bodazadu for coming and joining us.
Thank you so much again for having me. I love being here.
Oh, well, we absolutely love having you. So, from Anna and Nick and myself, everyone's making heart symbols. We will catch up with you next time here on Film Tank.